It's the 18th of July. It's 2023. Welcome, everybody. I'm your host tonight, Dana Durnford, and you can call me at 709-589-4406. Hope everybody had a reasonable day, if that's possible. When you consider what the nuclear industry got done to us. I got a very important poll tonight. Are the endless emaciated whales, birds, seals, sea lions, owls, caribous, everything else a result of Fukushima permanently destroying the food chain? And this is self-explanatory if you know anything about nuclear, unfortunately. And we got tons of news cycle to get through. We got some amazing stories to get through. I had a funny comment last night. Always problems with the expeditions. Yeah, because you're on the oceans, unpredictable. A battery failure is a new one. Really. This was battery. There was no battery failure. The battery in my camera was used up. I don't have any extra batteries. It didn't affect the expedition. I was still out there for 6 hours. He said, sometimes I wonder if Dana is as evil as the nuclear industry. I had to read that again. I was like, sometimes I wonder if Dana is as evil as the nuclear industry. Well, thank you very much. I'm assuming that's a compliment in some weird way. Dana, I like it though, right? Dana is as evil as the nuclear industry. That would make me special. Can one person be as evil as what the nuclear industry has done? It takes millions to create that kind of evil, right? I'll take it, whatever. But it's such a weird comment, isn't it? Sometimes I wonder if Dana is as evil as the nuclear industry. I definitely hurt somebody's feelings. This is such a sweet story. Remember the scam of the nuclear fusion? So it goes back 2 years. So 2 years ago, they said they got more power back than they put in. This was a revolutionary moment in the history, a 104-year history of the fabled fusion. And they said they got enough extra power back. It was equivalent to a 9-volt battery. You know, like 9-volt battery like you put in your radioactive smoke detectors with the 241 americium in them. Like a little battery. How do you quantify that? Because you use the energy of the entire country in a millionth of a second, right? And they're able to extrapolate that they got extra energy, and it was equal to a 9-volt battery. So the next year they upped that ante. They were like, well, Dana picked on us the whole year over that one. We can't say that again. So this time they said they produced enough extra energy to boil 60 kettles of water. That was their description, 60 1-liter kettles of water. 60 kettles of water. So how many kettles of water could you boil that you were able to figure out you can get an extra 60 kettles? So then they came out and just said, well, you know, breakthrough, we got more power than we put in. Turns out they can't duplicate it. They have not yet been able to duplicate their bullshit achievement. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory doesn't have a record for being honest. It has a record for being monsters. Triggered a nuclear fusion reaction that produced so much energy as it took to create. Since then, the lab has tried endless times without reaching the ignition. He said, we're making progress. We haven't got another headline 3 megajoules. And the whole world media came out and promoted that fable. This is amazing. We got more energy we put in. The whole world was gone crazy. It was everywhere. It was everywhere all day for about 4 days straight. It was everywhere. And stocks rose friggin' through the roof for nuclear fusion. And everybody said, well, I'm going to invest in it. They're getting somewhere. Just another Ponzi scam. That's what it was. It's all it's ever been. There's 50 years of these Ponzi scams. And we disrespect them for doing that. Holy smokes, we got a heat wave on planet Earth. Breaking records worldwide. 76% of South Koreans are worried about, or Japanese, are worried about the image damage. Image damage. Image. If Fukushima water is released, it's such an offensive headline. Very offensive stuff. It's so offensive. La 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 la. I screwed it up today. Such is my world. Let me see. $70,000 to 90,000 children just in one area were given dosimeters that they can't read, their parents can't read, or teachers can't read it, to trick them into staying into the nuclear wasteland. And then that is sent to universities so students can decipher what it is, but it has no name, no age attached to it. They don't know who it came from. Because they don't want them to have pains of conscience when they're young, right? Fukushima children not growing in weight, average increase is down 75%. Some children only gained a pound in the whole year. But 76% of the country, according to this scumbag media, is worried about image damage if the water is released. Image damage. 3/4 of the people in Japan are worried about reputational damage. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags. Reputational damage is, you would imagine, was the last thing you're worried about. You're worried about your health. You're worried about poisoning everybody. These are the same people who wouldn't buy the food from Fukushima for a decade. Lucky them, by the way. 76% of the respondents expressed concern about negative publicity. There's some really interesting statements coming out of Japan this last couple of weeks. Prime Minister, current puppet, said he expects to release, which has been going on nonstop for 12 years, to proceed around this summer, but he'll make the decision, which has been going on for 12 years. Release is nonstop. The tanks are actually empty. They were built to manipulate the population of the planet. depending on the extent to which measures to deal with the negative publicity are in place. So depending on the extent to which measures to deal with negative publicity, to deal with the truth, are in place. So are we looking at in the revolution, a new revolution now with censorship, I wonder? Because it's pretty rough right now. Measures to deal with negative publicity. The water's going to be filtered, they say, using removes radioactive substances. Concentrations will be lower than the nuclear industry standard, which they call the government for some reason. Meanwhile, the same survey found support for the release at 51%. Like the average person thinks it's like a banana because they've been just brainwashed everywhere. Schools, universities, media, radio, TV, theaters, with endless propaganda for 80 years, over and over, the same narrative. Over the long term, support has grown. Over the long term, support has grown. They wouldn't eat the food. They still won't even buy the food from the prefecture. By age group, broad support for the water release among respondents is 30% or 30s to 60s. 55% of those in the 60s said they support the plan, and compared with 33% who are opposed, and equal numbers of supporters and opponents among people 18 to 29 and 70 and older. When asked about reputational damage, 5% said they're not concerned at all. 95% had an opinion, apparently. Even among respondents who support the plan, 70% said they are concerned about fallout related to negative publicity. Image damage. Reputational damage. Negativity. Negative publicity. They got Magnas, like the Nuclear Man by DC Comics. Kids playing with Reactor toy sets. They're worried about negative publicity. They got superheroes in Fukushima telling the kids the arch enemy is bad reputation from the nuclear crisis and fights against fools and sloppy people. Reputational damage. Negative publicity. Fukushima mother and daughter had so many tumors, the doctors can't count them all. Hospitals are told not to test the children. Pre-Fukushima was 0.8% of the children had thyroid tumors. Because the thyroid's so small, these tumors, they're calling cysts, are 2 centimeters, but the thyroid is only 3 by 5 centimeters. Then it was up to, now it's 36% in Japan. Fukushima radiation's killing the children. Heart problems, leukemias, thyroids. Authorities are hiding the truth from the world. We need to admit people are dying, but we're not allowed. Child's risk of cancer is up to 100 times higher. It's actually thousands of times higher than an adult because they're developing, right? So their stem cells in their bones are immediately destroyed, and it's permanent. Poison, because their thyroids are saturated with so many isotopes, they're producing nothing but radioactive hormones, so they can't have a normal future. Now, 35.8% of the Fukushima children have thyroid tumors. And because the cysts they're talking about are 2 centimeters, but the thyroid is only 3 centimeters by 5 centimeters. So that's a tumor, for goodness sakes. So you're talking about 358,000 out of a million when it used to be 1 to 2 per million. But that's because you had 54 plants and over 100 fuel pools hemorrhaging radiation every day in their country. You can't contain it to spend fuel. It has to be vented, and it's still splitting atoms that it would normally, the same atoms as you would for powering 1 million homes, but now it don't have containment, and over decades they have, each pool has around 6 or 7 reactor cores, minimum stuffed into it because you don't have a repository anywhere in Japan. Sizewell C councils combine, this is United Kingdom, over nuclear plant traffic concern. So they're building a new facility, and they show you this picture. The planned plant is expected to cost about 20 billion sterlings, and they show you this picture. So look at this picture for a second. I'm going to show you another picture that's expanded view of this. This is the same one. So what you can see is just endless farms as far as you can see. But what they show you is this. But in reality, this is what Sellafield, which already has a new reactor, looks like. And this stuff is, you're talking about poison food, you can't contain the radioactive fallout, right? And so in United Kingdom, they didn't even learn any lessons from the meltdown in 1957 at Windscale. You might know it as Sellafield. They had changed the name to hide the crimes they committed. Killer hot particles. Sellafield coastlines is like Chernobyl and Fukushima exclusion zones. And it's the same here. In fact, in 2003 came out plutonium from Sellafield was in every tooth that was saved and put into a study. Now look where Sellafield is actually too. You would find the same thing with the children in all these surrounding countries. Because you can't contain it, see? And they actually had a meltdown. They got 8 million liters of mixed oxide fuel pouring into the Atlantic every day. And they'll try to blame, like recently they tried to blame the Isles of Man radiation spike on Chernobyl. Like Fukushima didn't even happen or something. Nuclear renaissance promised as the government banks on small reactor plans. This is United Kingdom, a nuclear renaissance. But you don't even have a small modular reactor after 50 years. Like you got one company that got a license, but it's not a complete license. It's like 700,000 pages instead of the 1 million pages they need. And the most important parts of it is not even submitted. And the design is just a reduced version of current designs. It's not even something new. And they got to use mixed oxide fuel, which is illegal, both in Canada and United States, in order to get some power out of it. And the waste is going to be 30 times more high-level waste, 35 times more intermediate, which is still brutal radiation, and 5 times more fuel rods if you scale up to small modular reactors. But they're not going to exist because geothermal is perfect. It's everywhere, and that's the new... I mean, you know, all the trends are showing, and if the only issue they have, some places they can't dig deep enough because of the drill bit issue, but that technology has been resolved without the help of governments or universities. They got every government and every university working on nuclear and fusion and small modular reactors, and none of them working on geothermal that's been around forever. It's around $5 million a megawatt. And you don't have to touch it for over 100 years. You can recycle everything. You can build a new geothermal plant at a gas, oil, coal, nuclear plant When it's finished, you can turn it on and then turn off the gas, oil, coal, or nuclear. It's brilliant, right? Geothermals everywhere. Just dig down several miles, you get 1,000-degree Fahrenheit temperatures. So it's better than nuclear, it's better than gas, it's better than oil, it's better than coal. It's more consistent. There's no commodities involved. It's pretty stupid, right? And they refuse to acknowledge it. And they give you wind and solar with no storage and because then they tell you renewables don't work. See? That's the game. Africa was blatant about it. They were just going to scuttle renewables. That's their words. Ministries promised grants of $157 million to each project can get up to $157 million, which is nothing when it comes to nuclear. They're just going to steal every nickel of that. 95% of it goes to administration. It's a funding round, but it's not about producing. No one got their backs to the wall. It's not like Oppenheimer had to get the bomb kind of scenario, and they just threw everything at it. No, this is all driven by private investors for the most part. And the government, of course, is willing to do anything. There's nothing they won't do for nuclear, but they can't get it right. They have no talent. The designs they're running on are from the 40s and 50s. Promising the beginning of a new nuclear age, a renaissance, if you will, he said. The great British nuclear would be more active, but arm's length approach. Yeah, here's a check, have a nice day. Of course, Great British Nuclear is just another long litany of failures that the British have hobbled together. The so-called small modular reactors the Sharps wants to build are still unproven at any scale. Not only that, they're unproven, period. They don't even exist. They don't have a wah. And then there's spokespeople that they artificially created because they don't have anybody in the nuclear industry that appeals to the population of the planet. And they just stooped even lower, and they used Elon Musk and Bill Gates as their poster childs. Tells you how just out of touch the nuclear industry entirely actually is. Australia's native community that has been browbeaten, has been ostracized, been vilified and demonized and smeared their entire existence, has just saved enormous, incalculable numbers of people by stopping a repository, deep geological repository for nuclear in Australia. You know what they're going to put down into it? They wanted to put into it, which is in prime farmland, by the way. Big surprise. Everything has to be repackaged. And so the farms would be immediately contaminated forever, which poisons everybody that eats it, period. And so we're going to put medical waste from the hospitals. They need to put it in a deep geological repository because it's so dangerous. Do you get it? There's crematoriums they had to close because they're so radioactive, because you're incinerating all the victims from the radiation assassinations at the hospitals. That's what radiation is an assassination tool. It's a genocide tool for the hospitals. Traditional owners win court case to stop the nuclear waste dump. Bless their hearts, is all I can say to them. My hat's off to every one of them. Thank you so much for stopping that particular madness. Don't worry, the industry will be right back the next day. They don't have a conscience, so they ain't going to waste a second and get back at it. The court ruling the facility can't be built, and they excluded the natives from the referendum. The people who own the land, the people that should have been the first ones in the conversation, wasn't even allowed to vote in the referendum. And the people in the referendum who voted in the referendum in this little community, they bought the land at 4 times retail prices for real estate. They gave all kinds of money out in this impoverished little tiny communities. They divided the communities. Then they had a referendum, and they won by a small margin. And then the natives who don't have anything had to pull their money, take it to court, and they actually ended up with a real judge instead of your typical corrupt one, and got a fair decision that will save endless people, because it was going to be built in prime farmland again. Almost all nuclear power plants and nuclear dumps are in prime farmland. Does anybody on the planet really think that's a coincidence? On Marine Day, Japanese, because these are disease factories is what we're talking about. On Marine Day in Japan, Marine Day. A lot of nerve having a Marine Day in Japan. Are the endless emaciated whales, the emaciated birds, the emaciated sea lions, the emaciated seals, the missing species, the destroyed ecosystem, a result of Fukushima's radioactive fallout breaking the food chain? Gee, I don't know, Danny. That's a tough question. No, it's not. It's really, really not. Hang on. Here we go. Anytime you're ready. Bear with me. Chug it, chug it, chug it. The whole world is insane that they haven't held nuclear accountable by now. Add krill mussels to the list of unusual marine deaths. Whales won't stop killing themselves in New Zealand. Until 2016, they were reporting the mass strandings of pilot whales as emaciated with empty stomachs. Where's that too? Oh, I took up the wrong one, did I? Did I ever do that? I'll try that again. My apologies. One of those days, maybe. Here we go. Yeah. Vroom, vroom. Done it again. Don't take door number 2, Dana. There we go. I got it all summed up in a nice, simple one-picture/video. You got a minke whale mortality, humpback whale mortality, gray whale unusual mortality, North Atlantic right whale unusual mortality, killer whale. You got beak whale mortalities. They all have one thing in common. They were emaciated. It's not a very cool thing to have in common. Oh, I screwed that up today. Bear with me. I just wanted to show you You had we had the so-called bird epidemic. Bird flu epidemic was jumping species like crazy last summer, right out of the blue for most people. We were looking here on the East Coast at millions of murres and turs that showed up emaciated in April. But we're also seeing the same thing in gannets and other species. 2 months later, they flipped it and they ignored all of that. It was well common knowledge everything was emaciated. And they said there's a rampant bird flu that's jumping species. But in the middle of this mass die-off coastline was this one city, big city. And they done independent testing. They done their own laboratories instead of sending everything to the same government laboratory. And there was all kinds of species, shearwaters and ducks and terns and cormorants, seagulls, everything else. The large number of dead birds found on the island shores in June have been confirmed to have died from starvation, not avian flu. But in the next communities, they all sent it to the government spot, and it all said bird flu. They done their own assessments with their own. No highly pathogenic avian influenza was found. And they confirmed the state labeled the dead birds they examined after as emaciated. All of them were emaciated, and the consensus was they starved to death, not of avian flu. Peru had an event where they got three, and we covered this in our last show, 3,500 sea lions showed up dead, which meant tens of thousands would have died if that many showed up, because not everything is going to survive or being found on the beaches or etc. And so I seen the headline, and I was looking at the picture, and when I scroll down, I'm looking at a sea lion that weighs 1/10 of what it should weigh, is completely emaciated. This is not the bird flu. This is death by starvation. And other pictures they had were even, you couldn't even tell it was a sea lion. It's so emaciated. And I've been doing this a long time. I've never seen anything that emaciated. And that doesn't happen in a couple of days like bird flu. And so that's why we're going to poll tonight. I just want you to understand there's other sides of the equation you really need to take into consideration. Are endless emaciated whales, birds, sea lions, seals, and all the other species a direct result of Fukushima radioactive fallout breaking the food chain? And because the radioactive fallout covers the planet in less than a month, and we have endless models, the typical model is 15 to 20 days, the radioactive plumes cover the planet. We actually have the studies of the fallout. We're currently doing research, and there's not many species to study. There's just a couple of residential colonies, birds, but there's no migratory birds showed up. We're in the middle of the biggest migratory route on the entire planet, where there's supposed to be, officially today, there's 46 million migratory birds coming through for over the next couple of months. They're everywhere, raising fledglings, and we go out this 15 trips, and the typical trip is 5 to 7 hours on the ocean. And we like to go out as the tide's falling and come back after the tide is rising, kind of get a double study in that way. And we have a couple of bird colonies, and the colonies have failed. And now we got a heat wave starting tomorrow. Mine's been pretty hot for a couple of days. But officially we got a heat wave starting tomorrow. I can't see the little 4% of survival we see there now is going to make it through this heat wave. Some of them obviously will, but like the cormorants will, because they can dive. But seagulls are foragers. There's nothing in the low tides to forage. This plume is France's plume of the radioactive fallout based on 30 days. We got another plume based on 7 days from France also. And they're talking about cesium-137 at 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima levels, weapons war fallout. Because the weapon testing was a war. It's the same bombs, the same radioactive fallout. So all the nuclear weapons tested, the minimum way to look at it would be 36,000 Nagasaki, because they're a plutonium bomb, 36,000 Nagasaki bombs worth of radioactive fallout. You go over to the apologists, you'll see 2,200 nuclear weapons tested worldwide. But when you look at kilotons added up, you're looking at 36,000 Nagasaki bombs. So that's a war. 36,000 nuclear weapons is a war. Just one of the Soviet Union's biggest bombs was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time. So is two countries firing 1,900 Nagasaki 15 kiloton bombs at the same time a nuclear war? The answer is yes. Yet the sky, we don't have a nuclear winter, we have a nuclear summer. It takes us several decades for it to really manifest, but then they just call it, they got you bombarded with the words climate change. And then they produced, they found 4 academic studies that they really liked, and them being United Nations. I'll show them to you, actually, just to be a weirdo. Here's the 4 studies that control every facet of your life. The first one is Wallace Brocker. He's the father of global warming. He wrote a paper on global warming. United Nations loved it. Now they weaponized it, and everybody has to pay with their life for that and donate their oldest child. Miles Allen was the father of net zero. And of all people, BP Oil wrote the paper on carbon footprint. They done that because they had a major oil spill and they wanted to blame you. So they had a massive advertising campaign, and that's why you hear the word carbon is shoved down your throat every second of your life. And the degenerate James Hansen, one of the most despicable creatures I've ever come across, he done a 15-minute presentation, he says, to Congress in the United States in 1988. And that started the campaign of climate change, weaponized climate change. So these 4 people have destroyed everybody else's life because of a paper they wrote that was grabbed by UN, which is 195 militaries, and then weaponized against the population of the entire system. It takes quite a few decades for that to play out, and we're well on their way. Help raise awareness of global warming, which is radioactive fallout from 80 years of emissions. Hansen said NASA was 99% confident that the warming, but there was no evidence. His testimony, though, was considered a turning point in history and was a pivotal moment and marked the official beginning of the global warming policy debate, which double, triple taxed you for everything that you need to live, for your toilet paper, for your fuel. BP Oil stabbed you in the throat. Miles Allen cut your throat. And Wallace Brocker, all of these, like Wallace Brocker, Miles Allen, and James Hansen got very prestigious jobs for being little demons because they needed to prop up the people that produced the paper. That's the same 4 papers you're using to bludgeon the entire planet. South Korea people are protesting what might happen instead of what's been happening for 12 years. It's very confusing when they do that, right? They haven't stopped dumping it into the ocean. Um, the best way to explain that is pretty simple. Because the buildings actually blew up. They blew up. And they faked the fuel pools, because the building don't even exist anymore. The fuel pools, there were two of them at the top. There were about 12 reactor cores, much, much bigger than Chernobyl. It was pure uranium plutonium, whereas Chernobyl was mostly graphite, which is really bad, but it's not pure uranium, pure plutonium. And Chernobyl was brutal. Fukushima is 1,000,000 times Chernobyl or worse. Because the chain reaction, you're consuming all the steel and cement and rebar and rocks and gravel and water and atomizing and aerosoling and ionizing and radiating and releasing it into the environment as radioactive particulates that have adverse effects on everything with replicating cells. In Iwate city of Fukushima Prefecture, which is a nuclear wasteland, hundreds of people, including residents and those who work in the fishing industry, gathered under the scorching sun to decry the government's planned discharges of radioactive wastewater from the crippled. These are key words. The crippled is a key word that shouldn't exist. Radiation in the Pacific Ocean. This was a map from Germany. So this was excluding the airborne massive radioactive fallout that contaminated the oceans worldwide in about 16 days. Let's pretend that didn't even happen. And remember, this stuff is pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. Think of an invisible snowstorm. Think of a snowstorm covering the planet after 20 days. And it never stops snowing. Instead of being cold, though, it pulses energy every second at the speed of light. Gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas. And when they hit each other, they change direction. And that particular effect, we call it an X-ray. And so all the species are getting full-body X-rays. All the 8 million species, all the children in particular, because they're closer to the ground, are getting even worse doses. And you destroy their immune system by attacking their stem cells in their bones. Because this stuff loves to sequester in the muscles, the organs, but particularly the bones. And the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel is curium isotopes, not tritium. I can't show you a single model of tritium fallout. I can show you endless models of cesium, uranium, neptunium, plutonium, blah, blah, blah. But I can't show you a single one of tritium. You know why? Because it's a scam. Undersigned, well, I mean, it's real, but that's the last one you're worried about. It's very, very nasty isotope, by the way. I've done entire presentations on my site on tritium. Like 2 hours, 3-hour presentations, actually, on tritium alone. Strong opposition demanding the Japanese government to reconsider the plan, which is what we're expecting. This is the scam, right? Okay, we won't release it into the ocean. But they've been releasing it into the ocean for 12 years straight. It covered the planet in 16 days. This is another model from France. The project is initiated by a non-profit organization including Fukushima Peace Forum. It will disseminate opinions against the discharges from home and abroad, not mine, but anybody who don't know nothing about it, by collecting signatures, establishing a homepage, web, and producing short videos. The head of the Japan Council Against the Atomic Hydrogen Bombs, as one of the initiators, told a press conference. If I have a press conference, there is no press going to cover what I got to say. He said the Futures Oceans projects continue to pose the discharge, even if the Japanese government pushes forward with the plan, which has never stopped. It's been going in the ocean nonstop. It would take a long time to complete the discharge, and efforts must be made to stop it, even after the discharge has started. Leaving a clean ocean to the future is the responsibility of our generation. Aw, that's so sweet of them. Water with a sievert per hour leaking. Every time you hear the word leaking, just envision punching a nuclear scientist in the head. Works for me. TEPCO has done nothing for over 2 years to stop the highly radioactive water Fukushima leak. Like, every time I hear the word leak, I'm just completely infuriated. Nothing has been done to this day because of difficulties involved. That's 2 years later. Foot-long pieces of cement on the site found near Reactor 3. These are the lethal doses all over the place. No, everything's in the tanks. There's only 2.2 grams, Dana. It's tritium, and it's going to take them 30 years to get rid of it. It's in 1,000 tanks, Dana. Some story, eh? You won't believe the story that came out just before I went live. They're trying to say that the radioactive fish that's being found escaped Fukushima's site. Like they say they got a net around the site so the radioactive fish can't get out. These people are insane. That's we're going to cover that. That'll be the first story we cover tomorrow night. Disgusting. What a disgusting lie. High radiation dose rates by the Fukushima stacks 1 and 2 at over 10 sieverts an hour. It's actually 25 sieverts per hour at the base, but nobody can get there because that's a sniper round, 25 sieverts. You can't get near it. You drop dead right away. It melts your organs. You'll squat down and pull down your pants and squat down and excrete your organs because they melt it, and then you fall over and you're dead. That's what happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. South Korea to intensify radiation tests in seawater. So this story cracks me up. 12 years later, now they're going to start testing the seawater, but don't worry, there's nothing there. We're just doing it to make you feel better. That's their words. Wow. I'm getting in the swing of things here now. So South Korea is claiming they haven't tested the water in 12 years. See, you get a different administration. It doesn't matter what the previous administration's done. They're not going to have that conversation. They're not going to revisit that. Hang on, I'll give you an example because unfortunately we have examples. I'm looking for one in particular. Okay, how about that one? Yeah, it's too bad I'm not in the conversation. Radioactive rain causes 130 schools in Korea to close. But nothing got there, Dana. Cesium-137 hotspots. Now, if you're only going to acknowledge cesium, it must be pretty freaking bad. Detected in Seoul, capital of South Korea, 1,000% the normal background radiation. But this administration, like, nope, never happened. Nothing happened. It won't happen until later in the future when they release the tritium, Dana. Public concern over Japan fish imports look to be justified. Over 6 million pounds from South Korea were shipped back in just one go. A professor says government needs to ban all fish imports from all regions of Japan. Nuclear professor, no one can block fish migrating along the sea currents. So the news story that came out just before we went live is the radioactive fish that are being caught are fish that escaped the Fukushima little port. They're taking lying to a whole different level. And their official story is, despite what you're seeing, despite that, only 2.2 grams got out, but it's all in the tanks, and it's only tritium. South Korea will more than double the number of maritime spots under emergency radiation test, and there's around 40 or so, but they only start doing it about 2 weeks ago, after 12 years later. It's kind of like Monticello released, they emit to 400,000 gallons, 1.4 million liters of water getting out 4 months before that, they emitted it 4 months later, and then they tested the river and didn't find very much. There's no accountability, period, nothing. There haven't been a single shred of accountability in the nuclear industry since it's been created, nothing. It lives under this special order where it has a secrecy get out of criminal liability card. Last month, South Korea began conducting radiation tests on ocean water at 92 parts. You mean they haven't been doing it for 12 years? They actually have, but this administration is now officially just going to disregard 12 years, and we're going to start doing it now. But don't worry, we're only doing it to ease concerns. Ease concerns. Last month they began testing after 12 years, which is not true, right? They shipped back 6 million pounds, and they must have been testing to ship back 6 million pounds. We'll announce, and they must have been testing a lot to ship back 6 million pounds. We'll announce them when they're available on a daily basis. So try counting to 1 million. You'll appreciate what I'm talking about. So they're going to announce every day that they found no radiation, because they got 87% of the population is upset that and this is on purpose, they got them to believe that tritium is going to be released in the future and that nothing has been released for 12 years. But the only thing that's going to get out is 2.2 grams of the least atom that you're worried about, but you're still going to be worried about it. The number one dry well at the site was 266 sieverts per hour. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. So what the hell is 266 sieverts? Well, if you had 40 transport trucks filled up with Walmart material, something like that, to shield you, and you walk past it, you still got a lethal dose. At 512 sieverts an hour at reactor number 1. They're going to get the fuel out of there, they say, this week, out of the fuel pool this year. And then they're going to get the fuel out of the reactor, none of which exists anymore. Fukushima radio, this is wired. Man, my goodness, have they ever turned against humanity. Fukushima radioactive water is going to be pumped into the ocean, and that's fine. Just, well, man. In satellite pictures, they look like pale blue and gray eggs of a giant butterfly. No, they actually said that. I got it in writing. There it is. No, Dana, you photoshopped it. No one's that evil to say something like that. Goodness gracious, Dana. No. This is the actual story. You can go read the story. It's right there, look. No, Dana, no way. No, there's no way. Because that would make these people terrorists, or narco-terrorists, or eco-terrorists. This would be like crooks. This is a con. This is malfeasance. It's atrocious. It's wicked. It's odious. It's evil. It's monstrous. It's disgraceful. It's abominable. It's nuclear. It's just nuclear, man. Laid in a tight pattern on some dismal leaf. Okay, I got to read that again because They look like pale blue and grey eggs. The tanks we're talking about. They look like pale blue and grey eggs of a giant butterfly on some dismal leaf. The eggs are made of steel, are tanks brimming with radioactive fluid that looks like a giant butterfly on a leaf. My goodness. They should get an award for being that evil. Workers have kept the used cooling water on site, building tank after tank. Actually, they built all the tanks in 2013, early 2014. They were only supposed to be built for a couple of years. And in 2014, the Riva water filtration system didn't work, the Siri water filtration system didn't work, and the ALP system hadn't worked. You can fill up all the tanks 6 times a day from a normal reactor, by the way. Water is extremely safe, said a professor of environmental science at the University of Portsmouth. Dana, you're not a professor at the University of Portsmouth. You can't criticize. These are experts, Dana. Actually, it's Jim Smith, and anybody who's been around here knows who Jim Smith is. One of the most despicable creatures on the entire planet is a professor. We've covered him at least 50, 60, 70 times over the last decade alone. The Cape de la Hague nuclear disease factory, which has 500 security guards, by the way, in France, releases 11,400 terabecquerels of tritium every year, which is 13 times the total radioactivity of tritium across every storage tank at Fukushima. I'll give them credit, right? They take evil to a whole different level. I could never dream up the stuff they're doing. That's the scary thing about this. Actually, Canada's nuclear reactor in New Brunswick releases 16,400,000 trillion atoms a year of tritium, which is more than probably all the reactors in Canada or United States and Europe combined, and Russia. Just a single reactor in Canada. The Gentilly plant is 1.6 million trillion atoms. These are they can't contain it, so they just said legal. But 16,400,000 trillion atoms from released every single year of this 120-year tritium. So, I mean, like, you got to do scales when you're talking about these kind of numbers to really comprehend the real picture, because this is nasty on its own, but it's a fraction of the real numbers we're talking about. It's an absurd number. It's an absurd number. Half of that is vapor. So when the wind is blowing, that'll cover tens of thousands of miles over a few days. The people who live within 10 miles of it, they figure got 1 million becquerels of tritium in them at any given time. And your body has to attack every single atom with white blood cells for your entire life. So it compromises your immune system immediately because your body is overwhelmed with white blood cells. For every white blood cell, you got to displace a red blood cell. And the red blood cells carry oxygen nutrition. And so when you displace the numbers we're talking about, because every time this pulses speed at the speed of light is wrecking chromosomes, DNA, cells, stem cells and everything else, and we have to repair that, and it does it every second. You got 1 million pulses of speed of light a second going on in your body. So you're like 50 becquerels a kilogram. Adults get permanent lesions to their organs. So your immune system is compromised right away, and you become more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. Now, Schmidt calculates the cosmic rays interacting with the Earth's atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean. He's not even a nuclear scientist, by the way. Annually cause a natural disposition 2,000 times more tritium than will be introduced by the gradual Fukushima release. And they're saying that Fukushima, the new story as of less than 3-4 weeks ago, there's a new story, right, is 2.2 grams of tritium is the only thing in the 1,000 tanks, and the only thing that will ever get edited there. Nothing has ever got edited there because it's all in the tanks. So lucky that the nuclear industry got our sixes. Casa Kuberta Arola, who knows how to pronounce that one, agrees. Negative coverage of the discharge plan has been used to brainwash people, the slut argues, and to instill fear against the nuclear energy industry. More nuclear. To me, she adds, has been very much exaggerated. Really. I'd like to fly her in a plane and drop her down on that. She'll probably take me to court for saying that. I know some have already done them in that for me saying that. And the question was, when we got him on the stand, was, do you really think that Dana was going to put you in a plane, fly you to Japan, and drop you on Reactor 3? Yeah, I did. Guilty. 70% of the children tested in Kanto, a region that includes Tokyo, have radioactive cesium in their urine. 70% of the children tested in Tokyo. You got 5,000 nuclear plant workers suffered internal radiation exposure after visiting Fukushima, suffering. Well, Dana, they had paper suits on. Dana, how was that even possible? You said it the first time, they had paper suits on. TEPCO, in retaliation to me beating the shit out of them years ago, came out with an article in Japan Times that said he burnt 7,000 paper suits a day in the incinerators at Fukushima. First off, you need a 4-foot thick lead suit to survive the experience down there. And anybody gets a nosebleed, the kicks them free. The truth, Oppenheimer, and tells them they'll send a check out in the mail. Of course, it never shows up, and it doesn't need to because they would have died that week or that day. The truth, Oppenheimer spoke about the atomic bomb needs a wide audience. Robert Oppenheimer worked on how technology should work for humans' interest, not against humanity, is enduringly relevant. No, there was just a massive secrecy. He didn't say anything. He was spied on constantly like everybody else. And has never stopped to this day. This summer's must-see movie is shaping up as the newly released Hollywood feature film, Oppenheimer, about the scientist J. Robert Oppenheimer, who developed the atomic bomb. And Lawrence, of course, who was jealous. Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is in the middle of Ukraine's hot war front line. The risk of a war damage is one danger to it. The plant could yet go into a meltdown. I thought you weren't allowed to say that word anymore. Like the Fukushima power plant in Japan. Ooh! Guess who's not going to be a journalist in the morning? Where the radiation was released from the spent fuel pond. Spent fuel ponds. Look at that. How often do you see that? I don't think, we only got a couple examples of that. The spent fuel pools would have been about 100 feet above whatever wreckage you're looking at there, Reactor 4, by the way. The plant could yet go into a meltdown. Like the Fukushima plant in Japan, where so they're claiming that the fuel pond released radiation, but not the reactor. That's why they put that there. Or there could be a release, like radiation release at Chernobyl scale if more than one of the 6 reactors melt. Fukushima had 4 reactors melt and 8 fuel pools. Chernobyl had 1 reactor with no fuel pools. And it was a graphite, not a pure uranium, pure plutonium. So what a sneaky thing to do. But they screwed it up because they mentioned the fuel pool, but they done that in order to quantify. Now I've become death, the destroyer of worlds. I got that. Bear with me. Sometimes I get lucky, and sometimes I don't. Today is a don't. Oh, crap. There we go. Let's do that one. If you put certain keywords in my system, because I got so many hard drives, so much documentation, because I've been at this for so long, you literally get the book coming at you. And then you got to try to catch the one you want, because you know how it fills up the indexes, right?
He knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Yeah, indeed you did. Einstein, the most famous scientist of all, practically disavowed Los Alamos before he died in 1955. And he said that if he had known that Germany would not get the bomb, he would have done nothing. That's an incredible statement, yeah? No one is immune from the fact that we learn at school is rendered inadequate by new discoveries and new inventions. Except for geothermal, which could resolve everybody's energy problem. NHK, which is Japanese major media, broadcasts a warning about internal radiation exposures. The doctor says even a low dose will cause damage. Well, of course it will. Serious damage. It's around 1,800 diseases you got to worry about, not just cancer. Watch children playing at a nuclear theme park. A nuclear theme park. My goodness. Character sings is very safe, efficient, and good for you, and the photographer is kicked out. Alice in Wonderland was used to convince children in Japan that nuclear power is safe. And The Simpsons and SpongeBob, and the list goes on and on and on. The economists on, well, let's talk about that for 1 second, because that's one of my pet peeves is how they attack the children with so much propaganda.
Bed goes up, bed goes down, bed goes up, bed goes down, bed goes up, bed goes down, bed goes up, bed goes down.
So they bombard your children with Spider-Man and the Hulk, who are created by the nuclear industry, and Batman and Wonder Woman. All of these are pro-nuclear, and Flash, or whatever his name is. The Wolverine, completely immune to nuclear fallout and nuclear fuel. Blah, 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 blah. You got so many superheroes. Parents can't be a superhero anymore. And just to dilute the word superhero to infinity, they got GoPro hero and guitar heroes. Remember in the old days when we used to hold scumbags accountable? Does anybody remember them days? Is that just me? Am I a weirdo? In the old days, we got rid of our problems, and that was the end of a problem. See, no problem. We got rid of the problem. That's what we used to do. We need to return to those days. The Economist. James Colbert was hoping to be the editor for The Economist, right? And Colbert started up a site called Fukushima Update. He sold it to the Fukushima government. We caught him in so many lies, him and that degenerate Ryan Dawson, the disgusting Ryan Dawson, saying kids just need to gargle after being outside. Well, all the way to Tokyo, children were kept indoors for almost 2 years. They're only out to go to school. They came home and they stayed indoors again. A grinning bird mascot has been enlisted to teach the Japanese children of Fukushima how to stay safe from the radiation and escaped from the region's crippled nuclear disease factory. Smalling mascots asked Fukushima children to gargle to stay safe, and radioactive sparkles is unhappy children. Heat wave strikes across the globe. We're getting our dose started tomorrow, by the way. I had to sleep in the living room last night with the air conditioner. Where I'm going to sleep again tonight and tomorrow night, I would imagine. I can probably hook up a bunch of fans and direct it into the bedroom. Which I might do that. Scorching heat wave threatens to break top temperatures worldwide, actually. Italy's island of Sicily and Sardinia were a high of 48 degrees Celsius. 48. Almost 120 degrees. My goodness. Thank you, nuclear. Bless you, nuclear, for all these wonderful gifts you gave to the devil. Japan renews heat stroke alert as temperatures near record. Of course, Japan is going to be brutal. So they're expecting the records to break again in Japan. Comes back to haunt you. How come they never showed us a picture of the 1,000 tanks? What's up with that? Oh, negative publicity, Dana. A rare look at the Fukushima nuclear plant as it prepares to release the radioactive water by no less than Mary Yamaguchi. She's the cover story, right? We go all the way back to 2013 with her. With AP, right? She's always the one they use to break the official story each time. When they're changing the story, she'll show up. Dumping doubts, releasing Fukushima wastewater, releasing it. They got 1,000 tanks, and the majority of them are small ones, but total there's only 750. Wastewater, nothing said by the nuclear industry can or should be taken at face value. There's an understatement. The site has been marked by over 1,000 tanks. Tanks? What the hell is a tanks, Dana? I don't know. Wait, don't ask me these questions. Filled with contaminated water that rises from reactor cooling. Like, there's so many people out there pumping the fake narrative. Makes for entertainment. Gotta give them that. I had no idea there was this many stupid people on the planet. The plant, well, if you want to see stupid people, you just go into the nuclear industry, you read their stories. It's a little overwhelming how stupid that lot actually is. Have also seen a daily complement of 150 tons leaking from groundwater leakage. They got to use the word leak somewhere, or leakage. Tritium, gonna get you. Tritium, coming to get you. Oh, pointed out such scientists as Ken Abusler, disgusting, despicable Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute little pet monster, little demonic sadistic demon. The International Atomic Energy Agency neither recommends nor endorses the plan. We covered that verbatim, right? I'm not going to do it tonight. Nuclear wastewater, $5 a bottle. The Australian government went silent over Japan's nuclear waste. Well, the Australian government let Britain go there and detonate over 700 dirty bombs. 700 plus dirty bombs, where they took fission product, wrapped it in hand grenades or conventional explosives, and detonated it. 700. Sadistic little... you know what? Let me see. Hang on. So we got some T-shirts that are only up for a short period of time. We got our infamous, "You filthy lawyer, you scammer, you sick bastard." Yes, that's right. Calm Down Charlie, the 10-year stalkers, famous one-liners, still available on my website. Yoshita Mashida, Tokyo Ball, a Chicago division, also known as Calm Down Charlie, 10-year stalker. You sick bastard, you sick bastard, you filthy lawyer. That's his famous lines when he calls in. He's called me, typically he calls 10 times a day and attacks me. For the first 10 years anyway. I've seen 20, 30 times a day. During his show, he would call in 10, 20 times. He just keep calling over and over and over. And we let him do it. And then finally, after over a decade, I blocked him. And when I finally let him back on, he said, "Why'd you block me, you coward?" You sick bastard. You sick bastard. His daddy was a famous puppy molester, like his mom. You sick bastard. That's probably what he calls me that. There's currently 1,000 tanks. I'm not even going to go there. Enhanced evaporation, which is dumping. That's what they done at 3 Mile Island, where they evaporated the radioactive water for 2 years. Instead of dumping it, they just evaporated it, which is even worse. You got a constant plume coming out of there. Hong Kong schools and stock markets are closed as Typhoon Talim sweeps through China. It already swept through China. It's back. This is not the first time. Oh, we got a poll, by the way. Are the endless emaciated whales, the endless emaciated birds, the endless emaciated sea lions, the endless emaciated seals, and the list goes on and on, a result of Fukushima breaking the food chain? Well, that's not very helpful. Let's try that again.
Maybe worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German Marine Research Institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
So the plume covered the planet in 16 days, but the ocean takes 6 years, he said, to cover the entire ocean. But the planet, the oceans were completely buried in radioactive fallout in 16 days. We launched research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska, year after year. We're currently doing expeditions in the same boat, the same motors, I might add. They've been to Alaska 6 times on the East Coast, and we're seeing an extinction event down here. And of course, we've done this year after year after year after year. That's a typical end of the day for me right there. Beat the shit out of myself all the way back to the base. We've done the entire coastline for 4 to 5 months at a time after Fukushima. So, and what we discovered was an extinction event. The species didn't recover. The species didn't come back. And there should be around 7,000 highly visible species in the tidal zones. So we went back year after year because the pictures to the right are my pictures. They show the species actually don't exist. They're exterminated. Because the radioactive fallout is actually real. And the reason why they're faking being in the building to the left is because my research expeditions prove it's an extinction event. It's a 100% extinction event. And when you see the food chain broken at this level, it goes all the way up. And so the whales and the seals, the sea lions, and the birds showing up emaciated by the thousands is because there's no food left on the entire coastline. We know because we've done it year after year after year after year after year. The species didn't come back. Is nuclear worth extinction event? The nuclear industry likes to think so, but Fukushima drama has a spark. So Netflix came out with a new series called The Days that I've threatened to do a video on each segment. There's 7 segments out there right now, and calculate the lies in each one of the segments. And I got them sitting there ready to watch them, but I still haven't watched them because you know what it does to me. How upset I'm going to get when I watch it. I'm not going to be fit to talk to for weeks. So Hong Kong got a massive typhoon, which means major radioactive fallout. Radionuclides in Alaska. This was bizarre. I skipped past this, but then I looked back at it after. Radon. They're talking about radon of all things. Facts against fear ahead of the Fukushima water release into the Pacific. Facts against fear. Whose family owns a fishing business, says the fear about a controversial release of treated water from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant has already hurt his business. Did anybody bother to tell this guy that the reactor is actually melted down? So the media loves putting up these straw man arguments. responding to that statement because we can't have a future with our heads up each other's butts, right? So, like, even if you go all the way back to day one and you look at the buildings, this is, say, the 16th. Well, this is long past the 16th, but this is what it would look like on the 16th. The buildings there's nothing left. So for this filthy lawyer, this sick blaster, to come out and say, talk about fear-mongering and stuff like that, I disrespect people like that. He can go F himself for being a scumbag moron. 4 times a year, Kimura and her team of volunteers collect samples of fish from the waters around the plant. They've been doing it since 2011. So you got multiple nuclear meltdowns, you're only doing it 4 times a year. Really. And you think it's just a leak? Really? So, like, how do you have a conversation when they refuse to acknowledge that this even happened? The explosion, by the way, was felt 25 miles away, but they're going to call it a leak. A leak. So you can't have a conversation with people like that. The long arm of fear, and now the fear and the lack of trust is proven hard to shake off. It's affecting their livelihoods. She said, I'm a radiation expert, so I know that tritium has little effect on the human bodies. I know. This is Jerry Thomas. Jerry Thomas. I got a little clip of Jerry Thomas. We know Jerry Thomas. She's from the United Kingdom. We know her well. This right here.
So, for example, coming here, I would have got a dose of 0.07 millisieverts on the flight. And I actually went round Fukushima Daiichi on Wednesday, and the dose that I had going around the site, so very close to where the reactors are, it was 0.01 and probably lower, but that's the lowest it could actually read. So I got more of a dose flying here, and we'll get a dose tomorrow when I fly home, than I would have done from being in Fukushima.
Sick bastard. You sick bastard. Here, let me do it twice.
Well, in terms of the actual risks, there aren't any that anybody needs to be worried about. If people are concerned about exposure to radiation, it's very simple to carry a personal dosimeter around with you. And there are plenty of things that you can look up on the internet that will give you an idea of where that dose fits into other things. So, for example, coming here, I would have got a dose of 0.07 millisieverts on the flight. And I actually went round Fukushima Daiichi on Wednesday, and the dose that I had going around the site, so very close to where the reactors are, it was 0.01 and probably lower, but that's the lowest it could actually read. So I got more of a dose flying here, and we'll get a dose tomorrow when I fly home, than I would have done from being in Fukushima.
Sick bastard. Jerry Thomas, an actual demon, eh? Minister, China won't meet on Fukushima water. No, because that's the scam. See, you need opposition to build up a lie. So you need, controlled opposition to build up a fake lie. So a lot of people will use Greenpeace, for instance, or Beyond Nuclear. But in this case, you got Taiwan, South Korea, China as opposition, and then Japan. And so they're all going to talk tritium, and then Japan also will have anti-nuclear activists talking about tritium. And ultimately, I think what's probably going to happen is they're going to say, okay, you win. We're not going to dump the tritium into the ocean. We'll find another way to store it. And the whole world will celebrate. Whew, we almost lost the planet. China won't meet. China remains staunchly opposed to tritium. China's not stupid, and we've covered China lots. China was huge pollution. The European Union said July the 13th will completely lift the import restrictions on Fukushima food. These are not elected, these are appointed. Japan to release the treated water from Fukushima plant into the sea. Can you see what that nuclear is doing to me? Many of the tanks contain highly radioactive water, up to 10,000 times the safety standards for the release, because the ELP system did not function properly for some time. They're learning, they're adapting, to the truth. So look, if you fill up a single tank with radioactive water and then you dump it into another tank, for instance. Now you fill up the tank with clean water. Well, that water is no longer clean. That's incredibly radioactive water. If you dump that into a tank, fill up the tank with clean water again, that water now is immediately incredibly radioactive water. And you can do that thousands of times. Because radiation, of the numbers we're talking about, first off, if you actually put this into tanks, you're talking about fuel particulates. So this is going to gather on the bottom. You're going to have a neutron reaction. You're going to have a chain reaction. You're going to burn a hole through the bottom of the tank like Mayak, like Hanford, like Los Alamos National Laboratory, etc., etc. Not only that, if you try to filter it, the filter becomes so radioactive with thousands of sieverts per hour going through it that you can no longer get near the building. If you fill up a tank with this number of just beta that they're talking about is 1.4 million sieverts per tank of just beta, because apparently nothing else exists. But that means you can't build another tank on the site because you can't get back on the site. So imagine filling up 1,000 tanks with this. Like the Wigner effect would be astronomical. You couldn't actually physically get anywhere near the site ever again. Not only that, you can't step over the hoses. Because the real numbers are 2.2 sieverts a liter, but they're only acknowledging beta. They're excluding magically, bizarrely, alphas, neutrons, gammas, and then by proxy X-rays, because you can't have any of it. You can't have two of them without X-rays too, see? Because they don't mingle, they reflect at the speed of light off each other. And that creates these whole body X-rays, which sterilizes all the species, particularly in the forest and the meadows and stuff like that. Nasty in people's gardens and flower gardens and vegetable gardens. The Japanese government chose the option to discharge the water into the sea rather than release it into the atmosphere after evaporation. There's literally no difference. You're still releasing it directly into the environment. It's actually dirty bombs both ways. It has all the qualifications of a dirty bomb, but on a whole different level of something we've never even conceived pre-Fukushima. This one is 2021. IAEA, which is they're not a regulatory agency. They don't have any authority. Japan has the last say. We covered all this last couple of weeks nonstop. I'm not going to drag you through it again. So we covered this in 2021, by the way. The water was used to cool the plant's reactors, but started to leak after the disaster. And here to see the word leak again. The water is treated, and some is reused as cooling water. I mean, remember that story, because we've covered that for many, many, many years, where they claimed they were filtering it, then the water would go back on the melted reactors. And you can't do that because, first off, the emissions from a nuclear accident or any nuclear plant at all is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. But they're lowballing it. That's the official government statement, so it's infinitely worse than that. If it's gone through a chain reaction and you put it back on the chain reaction again, which is typically known as mixed oxide fuel, MOX fuel, it's 2 billion times more toxic. It's 2 billion times 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Everything is a hot particle, see? Some is reused as cooling water. This is how they're accounting for not filling all the tanks up in the first year. Where they were filtering it, and they were doing this for the first 3 years when there was they admit, all the way up until August 2014, the filtration systems had never worked and weren't even tried. And the issue was, the minute you try to put 2.2 sieverts a liter through this stuff, you have to run away and you can't decommission it for thousands of years, what you just created. And to prevent rumors that may hurt the reputation of food products from Fukushima. Prevent rumors that may hurt the food from the nuclear wasteland. Well, hang on. Let me do this for you, because I think it's important that you get more perspective. The mentally handicapped are working at Fukushima, not academics, not Jerry Thomas, not Abusler, not nuclear corporations, not Bechtel, not fluoride, not Harvard or Yale or Stanford or Oxford or MIT. Mentally disabled are the heroes, not nuclear scientists. And the homeless are treated like disposable people, and that the victims they're sending into the nuclear wasteland are given second-hand paper suits so that they can make a profit. Somebody can make a profit. Even disgusting, despicable, revolting Forbes said it was outrageous that homeless people were being sold to companies and put to work in the nuclear wasteland. So the way you treat your motion pavish really is a reflection of the principle of the country, the average person in the country. So Japan are really shitty people. UN official astounded that the homeless are taken to Fukushima, not nuclear scientists, not nuclear academics, not nuclear universities. Official notebook, 60 and older should be prepared to die at the broken power plant. 60 and older should be prepared to die. In fact, Tokyo assistant governor was calling for a draft. Everybody should have to work at Fukushima. Interview in Fukushima, a lot of people are dead. Police are dead. It was over 300 police officers died in just the first 6 or 7 years, manning gates to abandoned communities. In Japan, Dr. Tokyo should no longer be inhabited. You're talking about 36 million people. And like we've done entire presentations just on Tokyo, like 2 hours, pow, 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 pow. And I concur. Tokyo Professor surge in airborne radioactive release has gone on for years, exceeding 25,000 times the normal levels. Extensive areas are contaminated. But this next two stories really tell the story. X-ray-like images shows radioactivity spread throughout the bodies of the Fukushima wildlife, period, everything. And it was the same thing for bushes and trees and plants. The Tokyo professor couldn't help but feeling pity for the trees. X-ray-like images show spread of radioactivity equivalents of a miscarriages, stillbirths, malformations, congenital diseases. Cesium, which is just one of 1,000 fission products you need to worry about, remains dispersed throughout the water column from the surface to the ocean floor. 2012. 13 months later. From the surface to the ocean floor. The Fisher story is nothing got out. There's only 2.2 grams anyway, and don't worry, it's in 1,000 tanks, and it'll be released over 30 years, so that can't hurt anything. It's like a single bite of a banana, Dana. Yeah, if you said that to my face, you wouldn't bite anything again for at least 6 months, I can guarantee you. Fukushima radiation still circling the globe. Levels consistently rise and fall in a 40-day cycle. Well, no matter what I show you, it's infinitely worse than that. That's the horrific, mind-numbing reality of this story. Is all of these headlines are just absolutely, if only one of the headlines I showed you is true, we're in a world of shit right now. This is 19 days of radioactive fallout. The plume has covered the planet 19 days, not 40 days, but it never stopped coming out of there. It's a continuous plume. It's so significant because, like, what I'm doing is just, I'm trying to run an educational program so people can have an actual conversation, not some imaginary conversation based upon zero science. Uh-oh, I only got ice left now. I'm in trouble. Up to 2,000 grains inhaled of radioactive pollen in a cubic meter of air. That's the Japan Times, by the way. And the headline says, cesium and pollen not viewed as a health risk. Of course it is. Your body attacks it constantly for the rest of your life, no matter what kind of isotope it is. If it's anthropogenic man-made radiation, your body is going to attack it for the rest of your life. You had a plume model at 1 million becquerels over the west coast. You can't work there because the radiation is so lethal, and you can't restore power to buildings that don't even exist anymore. 11 becquerels a kilogram. Like just a gram has 5.6 trillion becquerels, and a becquerel is an atom that pulses energy every second. That pulse is a becquerel. So you're talking about 5.6 trillion pulses every second from a single gram. If you get 11 out of the 5.6 trillion that's in a single gram, we're talking 10 million pounds of building that was lost. If you get a lousy 11 becquerels in your food, you'll start to see heart problems. That study was based on Chernobyl. The spent fuel pool was at the same level as the reactors. It was right behind Reactor 4, and it's just across the street. And if you ever seen pictures of the water running through the site, I better show that because then it's not real. Well, Dana didn't show a picture, so there probably no water ran through the site because that's how the industry works, right? Dana don't show us because he's a lawyer. He shows you everything else. Why don't he show you the tsunami running through the site? Well, like, I always wanted just to have a radio show so I don't have to show all this documentation. But the flaw with it was you can't educate the population the way you can with a radio show, the way you can with the documentation, the video, or videos like this, for instance, right? But it's not always easy to pull that rabbit out of your hat. So here we go, one rabbit coming out of the hat. So you see the tsunami in your bottom two pictures, bottom right-hand corner? Reactor 4 is right there, and the common spent fuel pool. The number 5 picture is right behind that. Oh, what's going on there, I wonder. I'll get there some way. Authorities hid the radiation plume to avoid evacuations. 8 in 10 Japanese people find the explanation for Fukushima water dumping inaccurate. But they refuse to acknowledge the buildings are destroyed and don't exist anymore. Right, so it's a straw man argument, but 87.4% are worried about financial damage. This is according to the media. This is not real life. This is just the media trying to manipulate the population into thinking this is how they should talk and should act and should believe. Korea nuclear power plant prepares for safer, longer future. Well, they've been hemorrhaging radiation out of this facility for over 40 years. To suggest that they're going to be safer is ridiculous. They produce more radiation the older the fuel is. The whole site is... The reason they were supposed to decommission these sites at 30 years, which was the original charters, was because of the Wigner effect. There was neutron bombardment of at least 90% of the site has to go to a nuclear holding site because they don't have a repository, they don't know what to do with it, which tells you how stupid they actually are. And the reason was because these are pressure reactors, they're 1,000, 2,000 psi, and the bombardment of gamma shines and X-rays and beta rays and neutrons breaks down the integrity of the atomic level. And layman's term, it makes everything brittle. So even I-beams, great big thick I-beams, if you go up 40, 50 years later and hit every one of them with a 9-pound maul, some of them are going to crack off. The reactors, containments, are over 1,000 pounds per square inch. And so when they become brittle, it's pretty easy to have a rupture, accidental rupture, after 30 years. But even then, they didn't have a 30 years experience to quantify that type of assertion. But they did, but they kept the industry right now. Over half the fleet worldwide is existing because they have extensions. South Korea says if a tsunami sweeps in from the coastline, the steel walls will close and stop the reactor with a 30-meter high steel walls. Japan's so full of excrement, it just falls out of their mouth. So I've done this story twice. I read it twice. I only captured 2 the first time. Well, I read it 3 times. Originally, you read the story, then you go back and you start capturing statements that you want to challenge. And then you do it again the 3rd time when you do the live show, right? Which is now. I've done it an extra time. The levels of cesium found below the standards for health concern from direct exposure. So that's a key word because a single atom in your body over 30 or 40 years, your body will eventually build a tumor around it to contain it. It'll attack it every second of your life for 30 years. So if you've got 1 million in you, it'll attack every one of them for the rest of your life with white blood cells. Every second of your life, it'll be relentless. And so that's called leukemia because you have so few red blood cells, you're mostly white blood cells. And because it's pulsing energy every second, and everything is destroying in each pulse, your body has to produce more white blood cells to try to contain that, to repair it. And it can't, right? And so it overwhelms you in increments over several years. And there's around 1,800 diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries that'll manifest, like heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome. And like after a nuclear accident, about a year later, and even 9 months later, they'll start looking for statistical incidences of Down syndrome, autism, for instance, and so many more. But those two in particular, they're going to be looking for children born with Down syndrome and children born with autism. And so a lot of, like after Chernobyl, they've done studies on Europe of sex ratio where there's more males than females, because that's what happens with a mass radiation poisoning. And so that can't be just true for humans, it has to be true for all the species. So you have less population over and over and over, eventually sterilize what remains, and that's an extinction event. And we're looking at that in millions of species currently after 12 years. Now, this has been going on for 80 years from the nuclear industry, these massive emissions. They say, rest assured, if any radioactive releases come from the power plant, the Alaskan Department of Environmental Conservation will be monitoring. They said it was like a banana, by the way. And the Division of Public Health will be communicating to the Alaskans any concerns that may crop up. And Art Nash is a statewide energy specialist for UAF Cooperative Extension Services and is the director of Agri-Ability Program for its half-decade of serving disabled Alaskans. He's actually a disgusting parasite is who he really actually is. He's the last one should be in charge of those vulnerable people. He's a bald-faced lawyer, and he's setting that Alaska people up for a difficult shock when the reality sets in. Because there's 1,800 diseases, and Alaska was buried. In fact, we have tons and tons of headlines on Alaska. Alaska had a major pulse event when the ice melted too in 2012, because it all ended up in the environment again, right? U.S. government bets on the United Kingdom. They're betting on something that don't exist. Why not use geothermal, which actually exists? UK to offer grants to builders of small reactors in a nuclear push. Again, they got $20 billion or something. And any company in nuclear can get up to 157 million sterlings or pounds, whatever the frig it is. Part of the Great British Nuclear, which was just created a few months ago by the current administration, the new administration, the Boris Johnson administration, they removed all restrictions on the food from the nuclear wasteland, but they actually never had any restrictions. They removed all restrictions 3 years ago for for cereal and baby food. Then they waited another 2 years to remove restrictions for adults. Like, that kind of evil is unprecedented. I don't know that particular one I just said, what Boris Johnson done. I don't know of something as evil as that, right? That's extraordinary evil. And the British do stand above heads and tails of the majority, except for Australia, of the majority of countries for being evil when it comes to nuclear. They're unbelievable. The universities, the professors, for instance, in the United Kingdom, they're exceptionally evil people. Not just one, all of them. We've covered them. Like in the nuclear, anybody that speaks on the nuclear industry, they're the lowest forms of life imaginable. All of them should be sterilized. If they got children, should be sterilized when they're born. The report coincides with a renewed moment of interest in nuclear Armageddon. Seaborg, which is supposed to be a floating reactor, a floating Chernobyl, a floating Santa Susana, a floating Mayak, a floating Fukushima. And so Seaborg really wants to make small reactors, but they don't have one. Right? So they get all this money thrown at them, but they don't get to produce nothing because none exists. We're trying. Thank you for your money. 95% of the money, and the huge monies we're talking about, goes to administration, not the actual infrastructures, and that's why nothing's been built. It's strictly about robbing the countries. Monitor changes to the icebound nuclear fallout in the Antarctic. Now, the Antarctic is already contaminated from Sellafield in the United Kingdom, Doneraye in Scotland, and La Hague in France, which are 3 fuel processing facilities. And the releases from these disgusting disease factories It's extraordinary, really. It's quite extraordinary. Labour's 2035 carbon targets should include nuclear, says Australia. But there were some dissenting voices in that story, which shocked me, really. Small modular reactors are tracking to be up to 5 times more expensive than wind and solar in 2030. So it's very unusual to have a dissenting voices in these conversations. It's usually just controlled opposition. It's like, oh yeah, it's got a few problems, but I think they got to figure it out. That's what you typically get. The reality of it is a professor is going to cut your throat. If they're quoting a professor, he's going to cut your throat. He's going to cut your throat so he can continue to molest all the children in the university. EU lawmakers reach outline deal for nuclear to be net zero tech. Now, EU, you're talking about 1,000 people, none of them elected, none of them appointed, all of them from the industries, and they're just going to do whatever the industry wants them to say. And they've ruled the European countries, which literally the worst thing could have happened was the EU. How worried should we be about Zapatophilia? And he says it's not a Chernobyl 2.0. I have a hard time not lashing out at these people because they're so evil. They're so absurdly evil. Jacobs was awarded equipment installation contract at the UK Nuclear Research Laboratory. And I don't know why they're showing us this hot cell glove box pictures for. Because if I remember correctly, that's a really, really old system that they're showing there. And Jacobs is just a long list of companies that are very connected, and their job is to fleece your country dry. Again, 95% of the money that they get, and we're talking huge numbers. What was this one? $5.6 billion, was it? Yeah, I think it's $5.6 billion. At Sellafield, no less. South Korea, last administration was anti-nuclear. This administration is pro-nuclear. In fact, when Yoon was elected as the president of South Korea, we covered it obviously, he went immediately within hours to a nuclear power plant and had an entire portfolio of pictures of him at the nuclear power plant and came out pro-nuclear. He was going around shaking everybody's hands at the nuclear plant. Yep, you're the future of South Korea. And I thought it was really telling how sinister and dishonest and disingenuous he actually was. 3 workers suffer cardiac arrest at an incinerator plant. There's a street in Fukushima City where 7 people dropped dead in the first year. Do you know of any city on the entire planet where 7 people dropped dead in a single year? Like even Yonge Street in Toronto, which is a massive street, 7 people have never dropped dead in its entire history, let alone in a single year. High radiation levels around the plant prevented helicopters. All 600 helicopter pilots from Chernobyl died within weeks. Some of them went straight down into the reactor, by the way. 100,000 sieverts, 2014. Blast of Fukushima Reactor 3 was a explosion vortex, ejection of the nuclear fuel. Well, the assemblies, the actual assemblies from the fuel pools and the reactor cores were ejected at a Reactor 3. Reactor 3 lost everything. It just went straight up in the air. And we actually have videos. We We actually have videos. Maybe we don't. I thought I had them right there. My apologies. Dan, you shouldn't say it if you're not going to do it. I know. I'm just saying. I'm trying. What the hell? Danny, you got too much. You can't find it anymore. You're too old. It's true. It's actually true, right? As long as I got any oxygen in these lungs, I'm going to be able to curb stomping this industry. 40% of Fukushima visitors show internal exposures. Well, actually, I got 7 stints put in a few months ago after 3 heart attacks. Okay, well, I guess we'll call it nighty-night. Well, wait, let's blast through the last couple of stories. 40% of Fukushima showed internal exposures. You're guaranteed to get incredibly sick. And you're talking huge numbers if it's manifested that you're diagnosed. Every amount of radiation exposure increases your risk of cancer. There is no safe limits. Fukushima girls have 3 times more tumors than boys and bigger. And 79% more medium-sized tumors than boys. Because you're talking about the cysts are 2 centimeters, but the thyroid gland is only 3 by 5 centimeters. This was a study out of Ottawa, Canada, and so everything there runs down to St. Lawrence to where I'm actually to. West Coast hit with 220 million atoms per liter with a 15 million year half-life. But when you look at the plume models, the whole planet's covered, right? And the last one, the University of Pittsburgh radiation expert, a child cancer risk doubles if exposed to just a couple of x-rays worth of radiation during pregnancy. But you're getting full body x-rays now every day from the fallout that's around you. And because you can't see it or smell it or hear it or feel it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it, doesn't mean it's not happening. That's why we're studying the species, right? It's because it's happening. And we made it. Race to the end. I don't plan these shows to be 2 hours, by the way. That's what they end up being. It's really weird how that works out. Almost exactly each show is 2 hours. Trust me, it's just putting it all, like just grabbing, finding, and asserting, getting everything together to do the show at night doesn't take 2 hours. It takes 2 hours to tell the story that takes all day to produce. It takes all day for me to dig up all of this stuff. And so, because we ran into the ground, I just took the day off and just worked on the show tonight. I got way too many things to get done. And I once in a while I'll do that, right? Where I'll just have to slow down the pace. So let's close the poll down. Are the endless, and we'll do a shout out, I think, too, while we're here. Are endless emaciated whales, birds, seals, sea lions a result of Fukushima radioactive fallout breaking the food chain? Because I'm limited to how many characters I can put there. And so I kind of like just... We have 47 votes, and we appreciate that from everybody. We got 37 likes. What's going on? We got so many likes. What's up with that? That's unusual. That's kind of weird. At 37 likes, never get 37 likes. We do a shout out to everybody. John Shiflett, hi John. Tanya, well, thank you, Tanya. Dana Nasana, hi Dana. We love Dana and Lasagna around here, man. It's good people, amazing people. I can't remember the last time Dana missed a show on top of that. And Dana's a busy man. Colette, hi Colette. And Colette barely ever misses the show. And we appreciate. I don't expect people to be able to catch every show, and so I'm always humbled when I see it. Pihag, Nabi Noble, Albert, hi Albert, James Lucid, and James has some of the best one-liners, man. Amazing. I work like a dog, and James will sum it up in 5 or 6 words a lot of the times. Good night, everybody. Don Vincent. Just scrolling up quickly. The quick shout out to everybody. Port Angeles is going for the mushrooms. Don't take very many, though. Be careful of taking very many, especially if you took them before. Peaceware. Almost up through the comments here. I noticed last night I missed a couple of people. I can't comprehend how that happens. Kevin Marble, I think it's where I got so much going on, doing a whole show, right? Kevin Blanche, I think this is 3 shout-outs in a row, isn't it? Starting to get back to my normal self here. It's been a long time coming. I know Stephen Young is going to be out there somewhere. Hi, Stephen. It's hard for Stephen to type, so we don't mind that. We know he's as faithful as you get. Rock Nemeth. I think we're through them. Let's come back down to the most recent comments. Yeah, the whales can't stop killing themselves along with starfish. Starfish are all dying of bird flu, Dana. That's what's killing the trees too, Dana, and the rocks is the bird flu. Yes. We got 37 likes. If you make it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. It costs us very little, and it goes a long way. We'll see everybody on the next show tomorrow night at the same time. And we'll see you tomorrow night. Who knows what the nuclear industry is going to bring us, but you know it ain't going to be good. Have a great night, everybody. See everybody on the next one. I can't stop until we get another thumbs up. We need 38 likes before I can stop the show. So we're just going to keep playing music all night if it takes it until we get a thumbs up.
Deine Zauber binden wieder
And I've shown 40 thumbs up. See everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night, everyone.